Hello, everybody. My name is Simonebo렐li, and I am the Urban Forestry Officer at FAO. I'm sorry I cannot be there with you today, but I hope you still enjoy this presentation. Today, I'll talk about urban forests and trees, a key tool for adapting cities to climate change. Now, as many of you know, in 1970, the world was a very different place. Very few large cities around the world, or maybe 4 or 5 cities that had more than 10 million people living in them, and most people still lived in small and medium villages in and around rural areas. Now, 50 years later, the picture is very different. As you will see, the number of megacities has greatly increased, and population has becoming more and more urbanized. For the first time in history, more than half of the world population lived in cities. And of course, this trend continues. And in 2030, it will almost be 70% of the people living in cities, leaving many areas of the world sparsely populated, and a lot of people concentrated in a similar or in the same geographic area. This, of course, this problem of, let's say, fast urbanization will be coupled with climate change. And in some areas, like, for example, in this graph, you can see the situation in the Sahel. The situation will become increasingly complicated. It is estimated, and this is an article from Lancet, that by the end of this century, the temperature will go up by 7 degrees and the population will triple. As you can imagine, this is going to create major issues in that area. Now, this move to urbanization is, of course, creating many problems. First of all, of course, overcrowding. People will have to live closer and closer together and with much more limited space than they used to have to. Also, there's an issue of informal settlements that grow just beside the new city. And of course, this also creates issues of, let's say, environmental justice and equity, and differences, of course, in income between people. And as you can see, very different living conditions. The rich and poor have access to very different types of environments. It's not difficult to guess where the rich people live, of course. And as you see, one of the indexes of richness, shall we say, is also greenness. The richer you are, the better access you have to green spaces. Poverty and let's say the pressure on land also creates a very strong pressure on the natural resources and the degradation of rivers and other natural features in and around cities. And this, of course, can also create extreme weather events as, let's say, the natural resources around the cities become progressively degraded and we lose our forest and natural cover. Floods and other natural disasters already much easier to happen. And in fact, they're happening already. Now, while it is not, of course, a silver bullet, urban forests can play an important role in climate change mitigation and adaptation. And active management of our community's forest heritage can strengthen local resilience to climate change and create more sustainable and desirable places to live. Now, a first, let's say, service that our urban forest and tree provide is carbon sequestration and emission reduction. Of course, urban forests are formed of trees, and these can help mitigate climate change by capturing and storing CO2. Also, shading and wind speed reduction reduce the demand for air conditioning in the summer and heating in the winter, and consequently, they can reduce the level of emissions from power plants. Shading can also extend the life of road pavements by up to 10 years, reducing emissions associated with road resurfacing, less work, less emissions. Now, trees that only provide services like carbon sequestration, they also provide goods. And for example, the sustainable use of wood, food, and other goods provided by the urban forest can contribute to climate change mitigation by substituting imports associated with high levels of carbon dioxide emitting during production and transport. Also, urban wood is a valuable and underutilized resource. At current rates, it is estimated that forest products from urban tree felling could save several hundred of million tons of CO2. So when you cut your trees in the cities, don't send into the dip. And of course, all the leftover wood from construction or other endeavors in the city can also be burned to produce heat or electricity. Let's say we need to introduce more and more a circular economy of urban wood. Now, urban forests can also reduce the impact of extreme events. First of all, they help control the heat island effect by providing shade and reducing urban albedo. That's the fraction of solar radiation that is reflected by the moon. And of course, by cooling through evapotranspiration. Urban trees can also help control stormwater runoff by capturing rainfall in their canopies and increasing the infiltration rate of precipitation. Reducing the stormwater flow reduces pressure on urban sewer systems, limiting the risk of dangerous overflows. In addition, well-maintained urban forests help buffer high winds, control erosion, and reduce drought. So, as you can see, they play an extremely important role, particularly in times of climate change. Now, many cities have been developing climate action plans, and these plans usually, or we hopefully should, incorporate urban forestry into climate change mitigation and adaptation strategies, recognizing that healthy trees and forests can strengthen a community capacity to withstand and manage climate-related hazards. Also, active management of urban forest in relation to climate change strengthens the resilience of communities to its effects and creates a more livable and desirable places to live. We'll hear more about this afterwards. Now, of course, to have all these beneficial results, we need to manage our urban forests. And we need to manage, first of all, for mitigation of climate change. First of all, we need to choose the right species. So we'd like to choose large species with dense wood and species that have a better carbon sequestration to emission ratios. That means they sequester more carbon and they actually fix it in their wood. Also, it's important to maintain a continuous tree cover, which also helps to accumulate carbon in urban soils. Soils, as you know, may also play an important role in carbon sequestration. Extending and improving plant pits prolongs the life of trees and increases stormwater infiltration. So make sure that trees have enough space to perform all their functions. Of course, replacing fossil fuel-intensive alternatives with wood product in building construction reduces net greenhouse gas emissions. So not only the forest around the buildings, but also the buildings made from material from the forest. And finally, once again, if the space allows and the species are sturdy enough, it's important to, as much as possible, facilitate natural regeneration of forests. That way, we reduce all the fossil fuels which are associated with tree planting and maintenance, and of course, transporting trees from a nursery to a site. If we can get natural regeneration, that helps make this lighter. Then, of course, we also need to manage for adaptation. Of course, we know that the climate scenarios are not very favorable, so we have to make sure that we adapt to whatever is happening in the surrounding environment. First of all, it's important to plant a mix of pest, drought-tolerant, long-lived, low-maintenance species that increase resilience. Of course, finding all these characteristics in one species is not always easy, but an effort should be made to do so. Then we need to establish small groups of water-tolerant trees in areas that receive peak volumes, because this can help reduce flooding and the transportation of pollutants around the city. So, once again, the right tree in the right place. We also need to make sure we have well-planned pruning so we can improve tree structure, making them more resilient and more resistant to extreme events such as wind, floods, and so on. And finally, we want to choose the tree planting sites in relation to the climate vulnerability of the most at-risk demographic groups, such as children, elderly, or economic disadvantages. That means that when we have to, or if we have to choose where to plant trees, we should start with schools, areas in which elderly people live, and possibly the most deprived neighborhoods, which have less access to green space and to trees and urban forests. Now, of course, we have all these fantastic services. We've seen what trees can do for us, how they can make our lives better. However, to ensure that these forests and trees are well maintained, we need to promote what we call good governance. Therefore, as, let's say, managers of trees or managers of forests, we need to create partnerships with citizens and public and private actors in the area. So we need to go in, discuss, talk, and then encourage citizen participation in management committees and other decision-making bodies. We also, in this process, we need to increase political and environmental awareness and capacity to address complex challenges such as climate change through collaborative management. We can't do it by ourselves. We need the help of others. So how can we build this community support? For example, we can promote voluntary initiatives to make sure that they can support the performance of administrations. Increasingly, cities and other municipalities and so on have budget issues. Having voluntary initiatives can help make our performance better. Also, it's good to organize data collections together with citizens, and this can facilitate management decisions as they feel an integral part of what is happening and also collecting data. And neighborhood forestry days can involve citizens in urban forest management and strengthen social links. All this work helps to build what we would call community resilience. So urban forests can provide key social and cultural benefits that can strengthen communities' resilience to climate change. People get together, they live around space, and they can sort of create a stronger sense of community. Street trees can have a spiritual value, particularly in certain cultures, promote social interaction and contribute to the sense of belonging and familiarity. These are their trees, the trees of the community. Also, more from studies that have been done in many parts of the world, forest-covered urban areas appear to have potentially stronger and more stable communities. And stable communities are essential for the development of effective and sustainable long-term strategies to cope with climate change. Neighborhoods with stronger social networks are more likely to support elderly and other vulnerable residents during heat waves and other emergencies. If you know your neighbor, if you know he's in trouble, it's much, let's say, more likely that you will provide help if needed. Now, just to give you a few examples of what some cities around the world are doing. Phoenix in the United States is one of the hottest, let's say, large cities in the US. I've been there in the summer. I can tell you it's close to 50 degrees sometimes, so it's really not exactly the best place to be during the hot season. So to, let's say, address this issue, the city of Phoenix has launched what they call the Tree and Shade Master Plan. In 2010, they launched this vision of what they should look like tomorrow. And they had three main goals in this Shade and Master Plan. First of all, it was to raise awareness, that is, educate people about the importance of shade, of nature, of, let's say, being engaged in actively in participating in decision-making, but also in shaping the policies of the city. Then the second goal was that of preserving, protecting, and increasing the forest cover. That is, not only planting new trees, but also ensuring that those who exist already are actually preserved properly and protected. And finally, the third goal, of course, was that of sustainably managing the infrastructure. And so there, it was really about creating standards, creating plans, creating acts to make sure that all the existing infrastructure was managed in a proper and sustainable way towards the three, let's say, towards the overall goal of helping, let's say, Phoenix becoming a more livable city. Medellin in Colombia has another very good example of what action cities are taken to, let's say, combat climate change. And here they have created what is called the Green Corridors Program, connecting green roads, vertical gardens, streams, parks and hills. And this has substantially improved air quality and helped reduce the temperature by 2 degrees in the city. The objective, of course, is to do it in the entire city, and that is what they're working towards. So far, they have created about 30 green corridors and about 124 parks. These are connected through plantings. Initially, they planted about 120,000 plants overall and 12,500 trees on roads and parks. Then this plan is now reached an objective of planting 2.5 million small plants and almost 900,000 cities. 900,000 trees throughout the city. I'm sorry. So anyways, yes, so the idea is that progressively expand this and overall try and mitigate the temperature by 2 degrees throughout the city. Another a seminal or famous example of, let's say, urban forestry planning is Melbourne in Australia. There, they have developed a plan for the future urban forests, and basically looking at how trees and forests will become affected by future temperatures. And therefore, they're looking at how these trees that are already managed by the city, which is about 60,000, but of course, this doesn't include all of the trees in private areas, how these will be affected. And the main challenges will be pests and diseases, climate changes, and of course, the temperature is going to go up, and increasing population and density. So they are aiming, in fact, to increase the canopy cover, to increase the diversity, also because the more diverse the forest, the more resilient it is, and also improve vegetation health, which will in turn would improve moisture and biodiversity. All this through continuous consultation with the local population. And finally, a sort of more, let's say, example from a drier, even drier area. That's the case of Riyadh in Saudi Arabia. And Riyadh has established what is called the Green Riyadh project, which is probably one of the most ambitious programs in the world. Of course, luckily for them, they have the resources to actually implement it. And their plan to create these, let's say, very complex system of, let's say, green spaces. And they have planned for 43 large parks, 1,200 let's say, roads with trees, 200 kilometers of trees around main roads, some new wadis, new public complex, and so on overall. Plus, they will also operate in at neighborhood level, 120 neighborhoods, creating 3,000 new parks. Now, of course, this requires a plan in which we put together the greening projects with soft enablers such as research and development, regulations, communication and governance, and hard enablers such as soil enhancement, operation nurseries, and so on. So, as you see, this is a very, very complex issue, but the challenges in Saudi Arabia, as you can imagine, are big, and so they need to take, let's say, extreme measures. Thank you very much for your attention. I hope you enjoyed my presentation, and for any for more information you should need, please follow the link on the website, and also you can contact me directly at my email. Thank you for your attention. Goodbye.